Okay, today, meet the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain right behind your forehead and crown, extending down around your temples. I'm kicking off with that today because it's such an important brain region to understand. The first thing to know about the PFC is that it's home to much of our highest human cognition. It's the most recently developed part of the human brain. Our furry ancestors had PFCs, sure, but they were smaller and quite different from the ones we carry around. All other mammals have PFCs too, each uniquely suited to their own needs at a species survival level, like ours. All vertebrates, like birds and fish, have PFC like regions, but they tend to be classified a little bit differently than mammal PFCs. Now, in some ways, the PFC is the part of the brain that makes us most human. It gifts us with the ability to manage and direct our thinking in ways that seem to be unique, even among our closest primate relatives, when it's activated, that is. And activating the PFC is not always a given. The PFC seems to be key in weaving the narratives that shape our sense of who we are and the story of our lives. In other words, our identity and even worldview. Mind you, lots of parts of the brain get involved in that, although the PFC has a powerful role in managing the maps that create our self concept and life stories, and notably in guiding the mindsets that can change them. It does a whole lot of other important stuff, like directing deliberate actions, especially complex, new, or intentional ones, activating maps across our brain regions. It directs what are called executive functions, organizing and guiding our ideas, strategies, and direction for what we want to accomplish, especially when the going gets tough. It helps us visualize and activate intentions, plans, and goals. It invites empathy and, on the other hand, thinking, helping us to get curious and allowing us to challenge our biases or assumptions to consider other perspectives and see a bigger picture beyond what other parts of the brain might quickly tell us is true. And so much more. Regulating our emotions, as in helping us not react to a snark or barb somebody threw out, or calming ourselves down when we're about to get triggered, even coming up with something other than an immediate emotional reaction to whatever is going on around us. These can be hard things to do, but when we do them, it's with the PFC's higher level help. Yet these things only happen when the PFC is activated, and the PFC can go offline fast when we're emotionally zapped or facing anything the brain perceives as threat. Activating the PFC is quite possibly our best practice if we want to show up with more presence, intention, and balance, not to mention in ways that are healthier for us and pretty much for everyone and everything around us. I said a key word there, practice. Anything you practice, whether consciously or unconsciously, gets easier for the brain to activate over time. New habits, unfamiliar ways of thinking and doing things like that turn on the lights in the PFC, helping it make sense of and direct what to do with whatever those thoughts and actions might be. In a moment, I'll tell you why that new and novel stuff can be so hard, though first, know this. Your brain will always do more of whatever it's doing right now. If what you're doing is unconscious, it's probably hardwired, habitual, reactive, and kind of automatic. You likely don't even know you're doing it. Conscious thought and action take effort from the brain and quite likely from the PFC. And the brain, when it comes to energy, is an absolute cheapskate. Yet, because your brain will do more of whatever it's doing right now, it will make new learning, new actions, new habits, and unfamiliar ways of thinking and doing things kind of tricky at first, yet much easier with repetition. It's like sledding on a snowy day. The first one down the hill, there's a bit of resistance. You have to forge the path, some starts and stops and pushes and skids along the way. Yet with repetition, the path gets smoother and the going gets easier. Pretty soon, you're flying downhill so fast, you don't even need to apply effort. And that cheapskate brain one way or another, loves the kind of thinking that doesn't require effort. Simply put, this is called learning, changing. And thanks to neuroplasticity, the healthy brain's lifelong ability to remap and rewire the connections that run the show of being you, we can, especially when we understand the PFC, literally learn to change our minds. Which leads to the second thing to know about the PFC. Left to itself, and left to itself, you'll learn, can be a pretty useful phrase to use when we think about neuroscience. Left to itself, the brain doesn't always prioritize activating the PFC's superpowers over its go-to, faster, more hardwired functions. Why? Well, I mentioned that the PFC is the most recently developed part of the human brain. And we all know that new things sometimes aren't as efficient as things that have been around for a lot longer. The PFC needs more energy, a lot more energy, than the longer established parts of the brain. And the brain, as I said, is a cheapskate. Conserving energy is one of its most fundamental priorities. Per its agenda, ensuring you survive on a pretty ancient biological level, you might need that little extra blast of glucose for surviving a critical threat like a saber-toothed tiger jumping out from behind your kitchen table. So it deprioritizes prefrontal cortex types of thinking when it can easily run a routine that's more hardwired and efficient. Left to itself, the brain will call on the faster, more reactive types of thought than on the more responsive, intentional capabilities of the PFC. Yet what you're going to discover if you follow these brainwaves I'll be sharing here, there are plenty of times when the brain doesn't actually have to be left to itself. You can learn more about the PFC on episode 2 of my podcast, The Brain and Beyond. It's linked in the first comment below and by following me here. I'll be sharing more brainwaves and some other really useful neuroscience here on an ongoing basis. Now, I have 2 asks of you. First, be patient with me, please. My prefrontal cortex is still figuring out what all of this will look like over time. So thanks for sledding the fresh path with me as I get started. Second, follow me here and share this lesson with anyone you think might enjoy and benefit from learning more about the brain through easy, useful, understandable neuroscience. Comment below if you have suggestions or questions. I'll answer everything I can. And thanks for listening to my very first brainwave. It's great to have you here. Next up, we'll take a look at the part of the brain that can instantly take the PFC offline, that highly triggerable amygdala, home of the fight or flight reaction. Coming soon.